Good morning. Welcome to Laughing All the Way. I have a guest today that is a friend of mine that I've probably known over a decade. We've been trying to figure out how long we've known each other. Can't remember, so that says we go back a long way. But her name is Raylene, and I brought her today because in all the years that I've known Raylene, she has personified volunteerism, if that's how you say it. But she volunteers all the time. She gives her time and her money and her efforts to just local people and anyone she meets. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I want you to meet Raylene. There you are. Now you have to say something.
Good morning, Kathy.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've already talked a bit on the way here. We talked nothing about volunteering.
Right.
Because we got off on other tenets and channels. But I wanted to ask you, what do you do right now for volunteering?
I volunteer at the Red Door Thrush Shop. I volunteer at the church. I volunteer my time with the fish program. Anything that's out there. I help DCF. I work with the probation officers. I think that's pretty much it.
So the thrift store, explain how many days that is. What does that mean? You volunteer at the thrift store. When people say that, that means that they go in for 3 hours, 1 day a week. What do you do at the thrift store?
I'm usually there 6 days a week because I am a supervisor, so people that come there that have to be there, I have to supervise them and help them. And I think if anybody in town needs help, they know to come to the thrush shop and look for me, and that's what they do.
And you're there from 9 in the morning till how late?
Well, I've been known to be there till 8, 9 o'clock at night because many things are delivered and they have to be taken care of, and all the stuff goes to needy and people down on their luck, and you just have to make sure they get what they need.
And every Friday night you cook dinner.
Yes.
For how many people?
Last week it was 67 people. I've cooked, and it was a surprise, I think 107 people, which I only had planned on 50 or 60 people. But it's a community dinner that we put together and want people to be involved and just to sit and have coffee and have a meal with somebody. It's fun. It's fun. Yeah.
But you would say that about all of the things that you do, that it's fun.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much.
How long have you been working at the thrift store?
A long time. A long time. I think it's getting close to 30 years, I think.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Now before you because you give away this time, you're not making money from it.
No. I have a cleaning business that I do on the side that I fit in somewhere, but I always find time.
I know. Okay. So when I first met you, though, you did the thrift store. I don't think they had the community dinners some years back.
No.
But at that time, you had people living in your home.
Yeah, I have taken people from the VA hospital that needed a place to go. They were ready to be discharged, and they had no place to go. And so one gentleman, they told me 4 to 6 months. He was with me almost 4 years. I had another one. He was only going to be there a short time. He was a real bad diabetic, and he needed someone to supervise how he ate. And he was there almost a year.
And so when you say they were there that long, the way that they left was that they died.
Yes.
So you took care of these folks until they died.
Yep.
See, that's why she's on. You're amazing. I think it's amazing.
No, it's just something that was instilled in me, I think, when I was a little girl.
Well, explain that, because we did talk about that earlier.
When I was a little girl, there was a gentleman, and he's long gone, so I guess I can say his name, Louis Carlisle, that lived in town. And he was a rough, grungy, dirty man. And to me, it was the jail he lived in. It was a little building in town. And then he moved into a garage. And my mom would cook for him and have us girls take food to him. And my mom and dad were always doing things for people. You didn't think anything of coming home from school, and back then they called them hobos, would be sitting at our kitchen table, and my mom or grandmother would be feeding them. And so this was just something you did.
So you got it from birth.
I
this
did.
is what you do. And,
Yeah.
And so if I came to your door and I was hungry, you would feed me.
I would.
I know you would.
Yeah,
and it would be good, because I've had some of the meals at the church.
Yeah.
It's good. Huh. I think that's amazing. Now you did all of this and raised a family.
Yeah, I did. I had 4 children. Right now, I have 6 grandchildren and 1 great-grandson. At one time, I'm sure my own children resented me. At one point in our life, I took a woman and 6 kids in our home. And she was probably there 3 or 4 months. There was always different kids at our house. And it was just a normal thing. One of the things I remember the most, one of the ladies in town said, "I don't know how you do this, have that many kids." And I always said, if I knew where my kids were, and I'd rather have them at my house, because then I knew they were safe and they were okay. I didn't care if there was 13 kids in my house. They were at my house.
And your kids were there.
Yeah, and my kids were there. Yeah.
So you grew up and you had 4 sisters?
There was a total of 5 of us.
Okay. All girls.
All girls.
Now you have done this your whole life, basically. You've always taken people in. It's just how about your other sisters? Because what I found is I have 8 siblings, and there's a lot of kids. Well, the most kids any of us had was 5. Most of us have 3. None of us really ventured out into that maximum capacity of having children. We don't have that many, and I'm sure in ourselves, part of our reasoning could be that, there was a lot of us, we wanted a little bit more control.
Right.
I'm not sure, because I haven't delved into it. But I was just wondering if your siblings or even your children added that volunteering to part of their life, or want nothing to do with it.
And my sisters, one tells me all the time I'm crazy.
Okay. Well, yeah, but we already know that.
Yeah, and I probably am. I have 2 other sisters that, probably give a lot of their selves to other people. I know my the oldest sister, she's doing a food shelf in New Hampshire. So, yeah, there is givers, more givers in our family than, And my daughter, my oldest daughter, she is, whether she wants to admit it, there's always kids at her house that aren't her kids, but she looks at them as they are her kids, so.
So you passed it on.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Okay, let me ask you another question. One of the things that I think I would worry about, because I work in a not-for-profit when I'm not doing this, and I make so much money for doing this, but but I work for not-for-profit. And when I work there, a lot of times I deal with people in crisis, and a lot of the hours are taken up with that. So I find that when I go home, I really like to be home and kind of shut the door and regroup. I'm just wondering where you are in that, because for a lot of years you would go home and shut the door and you turned around and there were still people there. How do you deal with that?
Throughout the years, it was like you say, you just wanted to go home where it was quiet. And when I had the people from the VA, I had to go home and feed them and make sure blah, blah, blah.
And the medicines and all
and,
that. Yeah.
And everything. Now, that wonderful telephone, you'd like to shut the phone off, but then you say, oh, there could be a real crisis, so I can't shut the phone off. And I think my biggest escape is I love to walk.
Okay.
So I can go for a walk, and then that's my quiet time, that's my downtime. But now it's getting dark. Too early, so
Yes.
I walk in the morning, but I still could walk at night.
But that's what you would do. You would
Yep.
just go for a long walk.
Yep.
How long would you go? Like 5 days or
5 days.
5-day walk? I've had enough.
Yeah, and leave town.
Yeah, leave town. Now
Yeah.
that's always an idea.
Right. But one of my friends told me didn't care where I went. There's always somebody that will say, "Oh, hi, Raylene. What are you doing?" And that's been known to be in Pennsylvania, that I couldn't believe it happened, but it did. So no matter where you go, somebody sees you, so there's never quiet time. But I love it.
Well, if you
It
could
keeps,
get it.
yeah.
Keeps you sane.
Yeah, it does.
Sane, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sane or insane. I don't know
Not
which
sure.
it is.
Well, let me ask you this then. Do you have any stories that are comical about helping people that have made you just laugh?
That made me laugh at the time or afterwards?
Well, sometimes a lot of things have to have distance before they're funny. I know that for a
Right.
fact. But whatever. Do you have any stories like that?
Yeah, there was one time in the dead of the winter, a lady that I knew called me, and she was getting evicted. She had no heat, she had no lights. I took her and her 6 kids, and I really can't remember how many cats in my house. And I only had 3 bedrooms, but I took them in, and I think a couple of days later, I even said to myself, what have you done? How are you going to? But it worked out fine. And one of those kids that I took in, not too long ago, I see her, and she said, I don't know where our family would have been if you hadn't have taken us in. And I even laughed with her, and I said, I thought I was crazy. And that was funny. Well, one of the people that I took in from the VA, they failed to tell me he was a pyromaniac.
Oh my gosh.
And I was at work, and they assured me he was fine by himself during the day. The fire department called me, and they didn't explain it too good. They let me believe my house was on fire, and I went flying home. It wasn't my house that was on fire. He'd set several little fires out on my property, and that was scary, but afterwards I laughed because he said, I don't know how it started, but there was a burn mark around my clothesline, and probably 6 feet away, there was a straight strip that had been burnt. And he just didn't know how it happened.
So what happened after that? Did he stay with you still?
So, oh yeah, he did. But I took every match and everything. It wasn't in my house anymore. And then there was another fire. Come to find out, he'd lit a piece of newspaper on my gas stove, carried it through my house, outdoors. And we used to call him the Hummer, because if you had a picnic and we built a fire, he would start humming, and the bigger the fire got, the louder he would hum. So that was funny. But he was a sweet old man that nobody cared about.
And you took him in.
Yeah, and I just overlooked it.
That's a pretty, I don't know if I could do that. I really
Well-
don't. You're braver than I am, I guess.
No, man, I'm just stupid,
Is that-
if that is such a word. So,
Well, I remember way back, we lived in Texas for a while, and we did take in some people over the years, but we took in a family once that had 4 children. And they were trying to get settled. They had moved from, and the one thing I remember that was funny, they were there a couple months. That wasn't always funny, but they were there. And the kids, it was hard for the kids. They were all little. They were under the ages of, I think there was 5 of them. I had 3, okay. At least 5 or 6 that were under the age of 6 years old. So they were kind of crowded in this, like a dormitory type bedroom. And kids really, they care about their property. And for Peter, my oldest, it was hard because all these kids were moving in and where were his toys? And he had to share everything, you know. So what we did is we bought these little stackers, and each kid had some special things in each stacker because these boys had moved with their special things. So I just said, I made a rule, and I said, the stuff in the stacker is your special thing. Nobody can use it unless they ask permission. Well, that helped a lot because people, you know, if they didn't want you, they put in their stacker. And one day I remember one of the other little boys wanted to borrow something from my son, Peter. And it was in the stacker, and he asked for permission. And I think prior to that, Peter had asked for something from the little boy, and he shared it. And then they came to Peter and wanted to borrow something from his stacker. And Peter looked at me and he said, well, what do I do? I said, well, he's asking permission. And he said, well, what's it mean? I said, well, it means that you can tell him, you can say yes, and then if you want him to have it, then he can do it. And he says, okay, ask me. And the kid said, Peter, can I use your whatever, Legos or whatever? And he said, no. And he was so happy because, and it wasn't what the other kid expected, but I remember they looked at me and I said, well, you can also say no, but it made him very happy to be able to say no.
right.
Which sometimes is hard for you to do.
It's hard for me to say no. It is.
You want to practice? Give me your cup of coffee.
No.
Oh, see? You can say it. It just depends on what we're
This
asking.
is my energy.
You mainline it. You have an IV
Yes,
at work?
I do. I do.
And that's how you keep going?
Yeah. Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to ask you about the volunteering was that we live in a time when there's a lot of social services. And people get plugged into this and that. And you said that you work with different agencies. But you know, for a fact, that you can supply people with rent money and food and clothing and all of that. But there's a bigger picture of what they're missing, like that gentleman that you had that liked to burn down things. And could you speak about that?
Our system, there's something wrong with it. There's been something wrong with it for a long, long time. You can help people to only a certain point. And that can be with food, clothes, or finances. And then there comes a point in their life that they have to figure out, this isn't working. We need to do something different. This is really a hard question.
I know. Well, because we don't have an answer.
No, I don't think anybody has an answer to this. And I think the majority of people that live in Vermont do not believe that there's homeless people. There is homeless people. You know, I said that one day in South Royalton, and someone said, there's no homeless people in South Royalton. And I said, well, you ought to take a hike up by the reservoir. It would scare you what you see. And they're young people. And they're not stupid people, they're educated people, they've lost their jobs, so you lose your job, you can't pay the rent, and it just is a cycle. And some people can't ask for help, and then there's those other people that just continue and continue to ask for help. But a lot of them don't know how to fix their own selves.
I think that's true. I think that's true. Well, what we talked about earlier is that there's something's been lost because there's not that sense of family or community that there used to be, where there's a lot of people that are falling through the cracks because they don't have anybody.
Right.
You know,
right.
They come from broken homes, and then they start their own life making broken homes because they don't even know how to work on relationships. And I guess what I'm thinking is so important, if an individual, yourself as one, me as another, if, you know, we don't have to save the whole world. We don't have to clothe the whole world. We don't have to feed the whole world. But if there's someone in your life that's missing and doesn't have a connection to somebody, perhaps you could be the connection for one person.
Right.
To make them feel like they have a sense of family, they have somebody that cares. Because I think we live in a very lonely, lonely world. Even though there are so many devices for communication, I think people are lonelier than they've ever been.
They are, and I've had many people say to me, how do you know that these people really, really need help? It's something in your gut or something that tells you. I'm probably more compassionate at times than I should be, but I can be not so nice too. I can tell you just the way it is. I've been down on my luck, so I can relate to these people. Some of the people won't even ask for help, but all you've got to do is have a conversation with them, and you know that they're there for a reason, and they don't know what to do. They don't know who to talk to. I'm one of those people myself. I was very much affected by Irene.
Yes.
And you know, my house still isn't back together. And I have a hard time asking somebody.
Really?
Yeah, I do.
Surprises me.
It does. And so I understand these people that just don't want to ask for help. And they need it probably 10 times more than some of the people that, you know, keep saying, well, you know, I just didn't have enough money to put fuel oil. And, oh, but you're smoking cigarettes. Gee, that's $10. And, you know, so sometimes I'm not always nice. But I fool you, so.
No, I know you.
Yeah.
Well, I think, though, what you said is really true about it's hard for people to ask. And I think that is what makes New England great. I think it's the very thing that makes Vermonters so lovely. We've been in Vermont for 26 years, and we're from the Midwest. We were in Texas. We're here. And the difference that I always say between Vermont and Texas was, in Texas, you know, they'd say, oh, y'all, come over. We just love having you here, blah, blah, blah. Well, if you would have showed up at the door, they would have had a heart attack because it wasn't real. And when we were in Vermont, I remember meeting my neighbors, and they said, well, you know, we get to know people, and we had hippies move in way back, and we waited, and, you know, when people pay their taxes, we know that they're okay. And so, you know, we've always paid our taxes, so our neighbors like us pretty well. But what I found living in Vermont is I can depend on my neighbors. Now, I might not see them through the winter because, you know, their top of the head can't get past the snowbanks. They're going down one way with a snowblower, we're going the other. But they're there, and they're great people. Yeah, you're one of them.
Right, and Vermonters, I think, are that way.
Oh, I think they are. Of course, we're proud of Vermont.
They are.
And we love to be here. Vermont, and I also qualify New Hampshire. It's kind of the same state. You know, it's one big
But
square.
but it's not as pretty as Vermont.
Well, they're watching this maybe in New Hampshire, so you have to
Oh.
say that it's almost as pretty.
Almost as pretty, you think? Oh, okay.
But still the same quality of people.
Yeah.
They work. They
Yes.
work for what they have, and they take pride in
Right.
their work, and they're good neighbors. You can depend on them forever.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what do you think? We're about done. Can you believe it?
I know.
I know. I have something for you. I always bring something. Now, the one
And
thing
that's what was scaring
that's
me.
scaring you. Now,
Yeah.
listen. I made that for you last night.
Oh.
It's a blueberry pie because it was your birthday just
Yeah.
a couple days ago, and you didn't tell anybody.
No.
And we're not going to sing happy birthday because I'd have to sing it by myself, and you don't want to
Right.
hear that. But because you make something for everybody, you feed people, so
Thank you.
that's what I did. I made you a blueberry pie.
Thank you.
It's cute, isn't it?
Yeah, that is cute.
Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to wrap up now. This was Raylene Lemery. She actually works at a thrift store in South Royalton, Vermont. She's a good friend. If you are in need, you don't have to call Raylene. There's other people out there. But if you can't find anybody else, you can call Raylene. Is that
Yeah.
true?
Yeah, that is.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that's it.